According to President Trump, Iran's new potential leadership said they're open to talks with the U.S. and he's willing to talk to them as well. But what could Iran's new leadership look like? Let's go to Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team. Let's just start, Emma, with a public statement. Trump saying 48 Iranian leaders have been killed in these ongoing strikes.
Right.
What has the IDF reported thus far?
So the IDF, they released a graphic that's a little bit broader than President Trump's figures, and they claim that a huge chunk of Iran's senior leadership has been eliminated, obviously including the supreme leader, also Iran's chief of staff, top Revolutionary Guard commanders, and the head of its missile forces. But it also lists leaders of Iran-backed groups, those proxy groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis that we've been talking about. Some of these figures were reported killed previously, and not all of these names have been independently verified in this current round of strikes, but it just goes to show how instrumental this round of strikes was.
And with that kind of leadership vacuum, who is likely actually in charge right now?
So Iran's constitution, under Iran's constitution, a temporary three-person leadership council steps in immediately. That includes the president, the judiciary chief, and a senior cleric from the Guardian Council. But in practical terms, the Revolutionary Guards that are surviving the commanders likely hold real operational control in the immediate aftermath, so that's important to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, certainly we are watching what is happening unfolding, but also what could come. The IDF now says it has eliminated what it calls all senior terrorist leaders in Iran, including the country's supreme leader. If accurate, this would represent one of the most significant decapitation strikes in modern Middle East history. Let's go to Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team. And President Trump, we know, has said that he is willing to talk to potential new leadership.
Yeah.
Speak to us about the process that could follow.
Yeah, so an 88-member clerical body called the Assembly of Experts, they have to select one new leader, and legally it's supposed to happen as soon as possible. So Iran's foreign minister says that could happen within days. This is all according to Al Jazeera, which suggests that contingency plans were already pretty much in place. So right now, though, a temporary three-person leadership council steps in immediately. That includes the president, the judiciary chief, and a senior cleric from the Guardian Council.
But it doesn't look like regime change would happen right away. That, you know, could take some time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not an automatic thing that would happen. The Iranian system was really built with redundancies to survive assassination attempts. The bigger question here is really whether the Revolutionary Guard consolidates power quickly or whether internal fractures emerge that the regime just can't contain. We've seen that with the protests recently. Either way, this is one of the most consequential leadership ruptures that have happened in Iran since 1989.
Amid the Iran conflict, there is a constitutional showdown brewing on Capitol Hill over the War Powers Resolution. Let's go to Morgan Stevens from the Fact Check team. And as we discuss this, of course, context is important. The War Powers Resolution, I believe, it came out of the Vietnam War. And doesn't it seek to limit presidential power?
Dee, the War Powers Resolution was initially designed to prevent never-ending wars in the wake of Vietnam. Congress passed it in 1973 after the Vietnam War to really reassert its authority and put a check on the president's power to send U.S. troops into combat without lawmakers' approval. Under the law, a president can deploy troops only if Congress has declared war, passed a specific authorization, or if we've been attacked. The president must notify Congress within 48 hours of sending troops into combat. And here's the big one. The 60-day clock. Without congressional approval, troops must be withdrawn within 60 days, so that clock is ticking.
And right now, the Trump administration is arguing that there is an imminent threat with the Iran conflict. Critics, of course, are pointing to the Constitution, and it just seems to me it depends on who you ask, right?
Right. The War Powers Resolution it's rooted in the Constitution. So let's go directly to it. Article 1, Section 8 gives Congress, not the president, the power to declare war. Article 2, Section 2 makes the president the commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy. So in simple terms, Congress decides whether the country goes to war. The president runs the military once it's engaged. The framers split that power intentionally to avoid concentrating too much power in one person and to prevent something similar to a monarchy, which is what they fled from. So how all that balance plays out in real time is often where we see these legal and political fights unraveling. But right now, that tug of war is front and center on Capitol Hill. President Trump is pushing the boundaries of executive power, while some members of Congress are considering forcing a vote under the War Powers Resolution to try to rein him in.
The Constitution clearly states that it is up to Congress to decide if America will declare war, and the 1973 War Powers Resolution reaffirms that. Several questions being raised, though. The Trump administration is making an effort this week to brief Congress on their latest action in Iran, with members on both sides of the aisle frustrated with their lack of input on the operation. Let's go to Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team, and from what I remember, haven't most presidents sidestep this?
Yeah, pretty much every president since 1973, when the War Powers Resolution was passed, have basically pushed the boundaries of it. So presidents like Ronald Reagan with Grenada, Bill Clinton with Kosovo, and Barack Obama with Libya, they engaged U.S. forces and basically argued that the 60-day clock either didn't apply or it didn't require explicit congressional approval. Obviously, the most recent cases include President Trump's strikes in Syria and ongoing operations against Iran and Venezuela have reignited this sort of pattern that's gone on, with Democrats and some Republicans arguing that he acted without proper congressional authorization under the WPR.
And break down the response to that 60-day clock.
Yeah.
That is very critical to the War Powers Resolution, as you know.
Absolutely, yeah. So the main line of reasoning there is really that the short-term strikes or limited actions don't trigger the 60-day limit that's written into the War Powers Resolution, or they just relied on existing authorizations for use of military force instead. So those two things can go hand in hand.
And beyond Congress, I found it interesting, the data that you found today about how Americans feel about all of this. Tell us more.
Yeah, I dug into a few different polls, and overwhelmingly, the American people don't agree with the conflict in Iran. Our Reuters poll found 43% disapprove of U.S. strikes on Iran, only 27% approved. A CNN poll found around 60% of Americans disapproved of the decision to take military action in Iran. But in fairness, it's only been a couple of days since the conflict started, so these numbers could definitely change as more polls will eventually come out.
The White House says the U.S. is prepared to protect shipping through one of the world's most important energy routes, the Strait of Hormuz, as tensions with Iran continue to escalate. Let's go to Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team. And any disruption here to the Strait of Hormuz is going to have and create global uncertainty.
Yeah.
My mind immediately goes to gas prices. I think
Absolutely.
many of us think of that. What is the anticipated impact to Americans?
So the Strait of Hormuz is really one of the most critical energy choke points, with a fifth of the world's oil depending on it. So closing or just slowing it down could rattle production and transportation of oil, which in turn would impact supply. Brent crude, the global standard for oil prices, climbed 10% at $82 a barrel Monday after at least 3 ships were attacked in the Strait of Hormuz. Gas Buddy says that they expect to see 10 to 30% or 30 cent increase this week here, and can't say whether or not that'll be the only increase that we're going to see. We're just going to have to continue to monitor it.
And what's concerning is that even just the threat of a disruption could have an impact. What else are you digging up on the potential rise in prices?
Yeah, I mean, cost is just the biggest thing. Costs could skyrocket here and abroad. Impacts on the oil and gas supply chain would raise the price for the foreseeable future on pretty much every single country. And then, meanwhile, the U.S., they have most of its own supply on oil and gas. We only get about a certain amount from the Strait of Hormuz, not quite as much as other countries. But what experts have told us is that even with our independence and our own supply, we trade in the global market. So for every $1 price increase, Americans would pay an extra 2.5 cents per gallon at the pump.
Iran has threatened to attack any ship that tries to pass through the Strait of Hormuz, which connects the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman and the open ocean. And global shipping companies are already reassessing whether it is safe to send tankers through the area. U.S. officials say the military is prepared to escort commercial ships if necessary in an effort to keep that waterway open. Let's go to Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team. And obviously, this isn't the first time that the Strait of Hormuz has been threatened, but I don't recall a time of extended closure either.
Yeah, that's the thing. It has been, had delays, but it hasn't ever been closed for a long period of time, at least. So the Strait of Hormuz has been threatened a bunch of times over the years, we can say that. But it's never been completely shut down to global shipping in modern history. The closest we've come was during the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, when both sides started attacking oil tankers in what became known as the Tanker War. So hundreds of commercial ships were hit or damaged, but traffic through the strait never fully stopped or came to a halt.
And explain how oil kept on moving through the strait because of intervention.
Yeah, this was really interesting. So the United States and its allies basically stepped in here. So in 1987, the U.S. Navy launched Operation Earnest Will, where American warships escorted oil tankers through the Gulf to protect them from these attacks. And some Kuwaiti tankers were even reflagged as U.S. ships so they could receive those American military protections. So the strategy was basically keep the waterway open, even if it meant escorting convoys through this dangerous war zone.
And it sounds like that same idea, that same strategy is circulating now.
Yeah, that's being discussed once again. U.S. officials say that naval escorts could happen again if shipping does come under direct threat or continues to, but the stakes are huge because about 20% of the world's oil supply passes through the Strait of Hormuz. So even if the waterway isn't formally closed, just the risk of these attacks can really drive up insurance costs, disrupt shipping, and even just push those energy prices higher and higher, which nobody wants to see here at home.
Right, and you already explained the impact to the supply chain, so we're watching it all. A lot of moving parts. Emma, thank you.
Thanks.
For more on this Fact Check Team topic, including links to their sources, scan the QR code or visit thenationaldesk.com.